Hey everybody, a great woodworking project for the beginner, creating a cool craft or tool cabinet.
Hi everybody, it's Mark from the Family Woodworker Channel. Hey, this week we're going to do a custom sized but a very simple utility cabinet that can be used to store your craft items, or in my case, I've got some specialty tools that I want to protect, and I've got a space on my wall that we're going to fill with that cabinet. The great thing about this project is you pick the size and the dimensions of the cabinet, and we'll show you how to put it together with just basic tools. So stick around, it's going to be fun.
So we do have to figure out the size that we're going to need, and that's going to be determined by what we have to store in the cabinet. So I've got some stuff here laid out for my wife, but she was talking about a cabinet for possibly her knitting needles and some other crafts. Nothing's really thicker than 2 inches, so her cabinet may not need to be all that deep.
So when you design your cabinet, you're going to need to think about the height of the cabinet and the width of the cabinet you'll need to make sure you've got enough room to put all your crafting tools or your antique tools. And of course, you might be limited by the space that you have on the wall. So if most of your crafting tools are relatively small and thin, you don't need a very deep cabinet. And this can be just 1x3 stock. This would be 2.5 inches in depth, and all of your tools are going to fit inside that cabinet pretty easily. So your cabinet may not need to be any thicker or any deeper than that.
So the first thing we're going to do, or the first thing I'm going to do, is that I found some 16-inch wide shelf material. In fact, this particular wood is aspen, and I like the light color of it, and it's got an even grain without any knots. But because my cabinet is going to be 30 inches square, I needed the two doors to be 15 inches apiece, so I cut an inch off both of those. But if you don't have power tools, that's okay. You could still actually buy this shelf material and cut it with hand tools, just setting up a straight edge, cutting it straight up and down, and you'll actually get a pretty clean cut that you need to sand. If you can spend a little bit more money as a beginning woodworker, a jigsaw has 1,000 different uses, and again, if you set that up with a straight edge, that's a pretty easy cut too. No table saw needed. Now, because I did have the table saw, I was able to rip down the sides to my cabinet to the width that I needed. So that's pretty easy for me to set it up here on the miter saw and just chop them down to the lengths that I need. But again, you don't have to do that. You can actually just go to the home center and buy this dimensional trim wood to the width that you need, and then for about 10 to 15 bucks, you can cut this stuff with a simple miter box and saw.
Wow, cool.
So let's build the cabinet frame. And I've just got some painter's tape to hold it together in the corners, and a little template that I created so I can poke a pinhole really evenly spaced through this template so I know where to drill. One of the hardest things to do when you put the sides together on your cabinet is to find a way to hold the pieces together so that you can either drill your holes, put in screws or whatever, and still keep the corners relatively tight together. So if you're going to put in some glue and screw them together, it's just really difficult. So we've got a way to beat that, and we'll show you that in a second. Now, for me, I'm going to wind up using dowels. In fact, I'm going to build my entire cabinet without any screws at all, just glued joints with hardwood dowels to hold my cabinet together. And the trick is to find yourself a clamp. So you might have to invest in a clamp so that you can squeeze the two corners down on your work table. And at this point, now you can drill them out, you can put glue together, use that clamp to tighten it all down on the table, and now, whether you use screws or if I'm using dowels, in this example, you're able to pound those things in. And it helps to be using a rectangular or a square table because that helps you square up the sides to make sure that everything is clamping up at 90 degrees. Now for clamping these things together, there's another trick. If you don't have long clamps, you can actually make a clamping system out of paracord and some thick plastic. And this is just black visqueen that I've rolled over about 5 or 6 times. And I'm going to use that as a glider so that I can pull the paracord around the visqueen, around the ends of this, pinch it together, tie yourself a knot, and you've got a simple little clamp that doesn't cost a whole lot. The other thing that I'm going to use in my cabinet is for the main part of the cabinet, the 30-inch by 30-inch. I'm just going to use some birch plywood, 1/2 inch, but I'm also going to put dowels to hold this plywood back together. So again, I had another little template, and I've got evenly spaced holes and a 1/4 inch drill bit, because I'm going to use 1/4 inch hardwood dowels to hold that plywood back onto my frame.
So just like on the construction for our 30-inch main cabinet, I built these two 15-inch door frames, so the two pieces will open to the center of the cabinet. And I built them exactly the same way. There's no point in showing it on camera. I basically drilled in some dowels, built the frame, and you remember that 16-inch shelf material that I had? And I cut these in a table saw, but again, you can just cut these with even a jigsaw and a straight edge. But they fit really nicely on this frame.
Now, if you were just using those flat panels as your doors, you don't need to do this step, but because I needed some depth in my doors, I had to glue it on the frame and clamp them down. So it's another small investment of clamps you might need to make. But once that dried, it was time to start laying out the additional dowels to hold it together. So you could trust the glue to hold the top to this door frame, but I wanted this really heavy duty, so I put 1/4 inch dowels all the way around the perimeter, and I'm really amazed at how fast my hands can work. Much thanks to video editing tools. And so here's the 30-inch cabinet where I've flush cut the dowels and sanded them down, and it looks pretty cool. The doors are still a little rough. I've got to get these trimmed out and sanded down, but they'll be dry in about an hour. Now the fun part is laying out how you're going to lay out your tools or your crafts. And so in this particular case, I'm building a couple of shelves. I've got those doweled in and glued down. In some other cases, I'm going to put in other solutions to hold my tools in place. In this particular case, I had a nice thin strip of tiger wood. It's a really dense hardwood, very thin, very strong, and it looked pretty cool holding those tools in place. And for some other tools that had wider handles, I created this little solution out of pine, and essentially this will allow me to rest those tools on the handle. And here's just a quick view of my two doors and how they're laid out. One of the other fun things I wanted to do was to apply my logo or a graphic to the doors of my cabinet. But you have to print this in reverse. And you can use some Minwax polyacrylic finish. This has to be a toner-based print image, though. It can't be inkjet. And for that toner-based graphic, you put the polyacrylic down first and then lay the graphic on top of that, and the color transfers to the wood. A couple hours later, basically, you have to get this stuff wet and take some time with a toothbrush or a soft scrub brush, and eventually you'll get the paper off that just leaves the graphic. It's not going to be a perfect transfer. It looks a little rough and rugged, but I like it. I think it's really cool. And you can do that with any graphic printed on a toner-based printer. So now it's trying to figure out where the studs are in the wall and to get this thing set up and mounted. And then I'm also going to have to attach the doors. And this is going to take a little bit of an adjustment. but I wanted to make sure that they would close freely, and as it turns out, they will. I also used piano hinges here. You don't have to spend the money on piano hinges, but some of the tools that I'll be holding in my doors are pretty heavy. So the piano hinges are easy to work with, and they hold quite a bit of weight. And here's how the tools are going to lay out. It came out great. And so I had a lot of fun building this project, and again, you design it. It needs to be a solution that works for you. A great craft cabinet in some corner of your home where you know you've got some space. And I laid out a bunch of different tools here. In fact, there's a couple of nooks and crannies. I could still add some more. I also had some antique tools that I wanted to protect and feature, including this cast iron level Stanley number 36. This thing is from the late 1800s, as is this claw tool, which has a patent of 1897, and this thing still works great too. So it was a lot of fun to feature these. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this week's video. And as always, if you like our content, we hope you give us a thumbs up, you subscribe to the channel, and if you hit the bell icon, you'll get notified every time we publish something new. Take care.